Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mendon Conservation Meeting. I'd like to remind everybody this is being recorded. This is the February 12th, 2026 meeting. I'd like to start off with roll call. No, actually, everybody's here, so I'd start with attendant.
There's more.
Bob Sweet,
The lighting?
You're gone.
Isabella Genova, the agent.
okay, and then item agenda number 3 is good and welfare for the public. Anybody here have anything they'd like to talk about? One of the things I'll ask is that anybody that's coming up to speak or from the audience speaking, identify yourself, whether or not you're a town member and street address if you are.
Just introduce yourself. You just went around. Introduce yourself. You just went around.
Yeah, Susan.
Okay. All right, at this point, item agenda number 4, public hearing, notice of intent to Nipmuc Drive, DEP number 218-0870. I believe that is going to be continued. The applicant has asked for continuance. Is that right, Isabella?
Yeah, we still need to amend the enforcement order, which was the document shared at the previous meeting, but you can also wait if you want attendance from the applicant, but that's still also available. But yes, they've requested to continue the public hearing.
Okay. At this point, I'll ask for other members' opinions on this.
Any enforcement order amended for the next meeting or whatever the applicant decides to come in.
Is there- And seconded, any discussion? Okay, at this point, I'll take, a vote.
You get to say aye.
Oh,
Everybody is aye.
oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item agenda number 5. Commercial forestry activities on 51 and 53 Washington Street, 153 Blackstone Street, 164 North Ave. At this point, you know, if you guys want to come up and speak about it.
Jim McCarthy.
Where are you from, Jim?
Right now I'm in Worcester.
Gary Smith, 186 Providence Street, Mendon.
Welcome. There was a call about foresting on property that doesn't have a forestry management plan, so we're just trying to get information on why there isn't a forestry plan.
Oh, I'd like to ask a question first. Why is this important now and it never was before? Why is this all of a sudden require us to be here and talking about this?
I'll see if I can get you an answer on that.
Yeah, so I can introduce the topic. So I responded to a complaint on 51 and 53 Washington Street, which started, I think, over the weekend or Monday. So that was the first call where I responded to the site. And this property very clearly to me is within a wetland resource area, whether all of the work or just parts of it is in wetland resources. And so this is the first property of real concern that I want the commission to review. Really all of the activities of commercial forestry have needed forest management plans, further review of the 164 North Ave show that you might be within the flood zone. So that was taking place over the summer. And 153 Blackstone Street was also occurring over the holidays. So that was also recent. So these are our first meetings this year that we need you to come in on, but the Washington Street property is the first one where very clearly, I believe, is in a wetland resource, which, you know, some timber harvesting of commercial value needs a forest management plan. But now that you have worked in wetland resource areas or buffer zones, you violated the Wetland Protection Act, which is why you need to come in.
Do you have the schematic of the property that you might be able to put up?
So there's a couple different resources I'm looking at. Mass Mapper is a resource to indicate where resource areas are. So I responded to 51 and 53 Washington, which has a DEP wetland layer on it. So this green shaded area here. And then further review of aerial images. You can very clearly see the wetland areas, especially in the photograph from 2019. So you can't say that all of this area is necessarily wetland. It might have been a wet year. But, you know, almost this whole area looks swamp land.
Swamp.
Or yeah, wetlands in this area. And then the last sort of evidence on Washington Street is the abutters has had a previous, there's been a previous filing on 57 Washington Street. So this is flagged wetland resource area. And this indicates bordering vegetated wetland in the area that was being logged today or this week.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would just follow on the question. I gather homeowners don't need a permit for like up to 10 courts a year. The other thing I wonder, usually I'm saying this is the best time of year to do crossings in the winter.
Yeah.
But is it true that a forest cutting plan is needed for taking more than 10 total? What's the guide, what's it? Or maybe.
You need a
Right,
forest
you want me to-
management for
Want me to answer?
commercial.
Please.
Hold on. Let Isabella, and then we'll take questions or answers from the audience.
So, under the Wetland Protection Act, you can take up to 10 cords of wood in or not in a wetland. And that's for personal use. When you get into commercial use and taking it off the property, you do need a forest management plan.
And if you have a forest management plan, you don't need a wetlands for temporary crossings.
Yeah, you don't need a notice of intent filing
Gotcha.
because you're covered through the forest.
Has anybody witnessed any disturbance in the wetlands?
You can't tell with the snow, which is why, in my opinion, snow work needs to stop.
Say somebody called you.
Yes, the neighbors called, I was on site. David Cobb is the subcontractor, and he said his tires have sunk. He was not aware of where the wetland flags were, and he also didn't really know the property lines. So those are all red flags to me observed on site.
He knows exactly where it is. It was the neighbor, was his name Chris? Oh, are you here, Chris?
Yes.
Oh.
I did not call.
No, Chris did not call me.
No, I talked to you. Oh, you did not call.
I did not.
Oh, I'm glad to hear
So I'm a
that.
neighbor. I'm just curious as to what the wetlands are. I have concerns at the wetlands. I've talked to you about that. I just came because I saw that it becomes.
A lot of neighbors.
I looked at that property back last April. Couldn't do it then. But now with the coldest winter, I think I can remember in a long time, this was a great time to do it. He did it very quickly. And it's not quite, he'll finish it tomorrow. And you, as far as I know, you can go in, that place is not a swamp, to the right it is. But behind the house, your house, along that, where he's going, it's not super wet. And it's a good time to do it.
We don't have a forest management plan.
There's no, we don't have a cutting plan. And you can take 50 cords or 25,000 board feet without a cutting plan.
Not in a wetland.
What, I don't think we're in a wetland. How do you know it's a wetland?
Because
All right.
Well, I
it's
mean,
very
I'm
wet.
looking at a foot of snow.
So historically, the drawings, the multi-mapper shows that there may be wetlands. So at this point, it would make sense to have it delineated.
Let me start over again.
I understand.
I'm here representing John Gann. He's 89 years old. He's home right now, stressing out big time about this because he does not like any attention called to him.
He's that landowner?
He is the landowner. He has spent millions of dollars saving land from development in this town, not to mention a dozen other charities I could name that he's donated tens of thousands of dollars to. He just gave me a $10,000 check for the rehab I'm doing at the Legion Hall. Whatever you have to do to minimize this whole thing, the work will stop immediately. It has already stopped on the other pieces that you have mentioned. And he can be out of there tomorrow. As far as this piece is concerned, no damage has been done. The land is too friggin' frozen to do any damage. Just please, for John's sake, it just makes me sick to think he's home right now waiting for a phone call to find out that, you know, he's not gonna be arrested or something.
We don't arrest people.
I know, but he just,
Excuse me? If you could address the chairman, not the audience.
Well, we don't arrest people, right?
Haven't yet that I know of. Carl?
I'd like to ask a clarifying question. Confirm whether this is a commercial operation or whether this is being done for home use, because that'll help clarify which section of the code and wetlands regulations we're operating.
it is a commercial operation,
Okay,
not a
thank you.
big one, but
Okay.
technically it's.
So we can now work with Isabella and the research she's done on what is allowable in what we consider to be a resource area and how we would proceed going forwards from that.
Forestry plan thing is new to me. I used to sit in that chair and I don't ever remember this coming up, except for on town land, which we did have forestry plans. But on private lots, I am not familiar with the rules and regulations on this. And it's just, again, it's mystifying to me why this is an issue now when no one, and I believe you have visited the site in North Avenue and nothing was ever said. So it's perfectly logical to understand why it wasn't done here when it was never asked to be done anywhere else. Nobody did anything intentionally. If there's any violations done, they were accidental. And certainly weren't John's fault. All John was doing was giving up this hardworking man here.
There is no ruts, no ruts.
And to speak to that is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to curb the ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we're bringing it to attention, so that way there,
I get it.
it's a public meeting. More people can hear that you need a forest cutting plan for anything over 50 cord, anything over 20, what is it, 1,200, 2,500?
25,000 board feet.
Wood feet, so, and again, that all, like
I've been
was,
doing this for 40 years.
I'm gonna finish mine first, but. So we're trying to set a precedent, which means that, again, you want to come in and do the forestry work, but you're gonna need to know that there are criteria now that may not have been in place before. Now, there are different criteria, and not that they're new, just now they're being looked at more. So keep that in mind moving forward.
I can promise you that not another stick will be cut on John Gannett's land, which he has much land, without talking to you people first.
Did they end up by pulling all the trees off there today?
Whatever was cut is almost all removed. If you get cut, ever since your visit, nothing's been cut, just cleaning up what's been.
Isabel, I mean, Leah.
I just want to speak to the fact that you said nothing's been damaged, but when you clear cut the wetlands, maybe there's not damage that day, but you've essentially destroyed an ecosystem that was supposed to be protected. And there is a buffer zone, There's a whole swath of trees that shouldn't be cut near a wetland for that reason. So now that you've clear cut that,
He didn't clear
this
cut.
stuff,
You know, first thing you're assuming something.
Have you been there?
saw the pictures.
Do you ever see
Somebody went and took pictures?
All right, so again,
Sorry, let me just finish. When you clear, when you take trees out of the forest, even if you're not clear cutting, you are damaging the forest.
Okay.
That's,
so
so when you say there's no damage, there's damage. It's just not today.
So at this point, moving forward, are we allowed to go on site and see the
Absolutely,
site? Would
absolutely.
John be okay with that?
I have to ask him, I can't.
Right, you can't speak for him, so
I know you can't go on the land without his permission.
that's why I'm
I've been
asking
there
now.
before.
Because it would be nice to get a first-hand look and see what's there, to see whether or not, there's ruts, whether or not there's problems, whether or not it's clear cut, whether,
Yeah.
let's get a baseline for what we're talking about before we get all worried about how much or how little has been done.
This guy is using a machine which is 10 times better than a skidder. It's what they call a harvester.
I know the machine.
No, but maybe they don't. And what this thing does is grabs a tree, cuts it, lays it on the side, takes the branches off, cuts the different lengths. Then he takes the branches, the small stuff, he puts it in front of him. So when he goes forward, he's constantly on like a rug of brush, a carpet. He's not making any ruts, no impact to the soil.
Are there bumpers?
Again,
What?
Did you use tree bumpers?
There's he doesn't create any bumpers because of this.
I said, did you use tree bumpers for the equipment coming out?
I don't know what that is.
It's logs that are stacked so that the trucks and whatever don't go off the skid row.
Oh, no, there's no need for that. Come on down and take a look.
There is no skid row.
Gary, will you ask John if it's okay to go on?
I will ask him,
I
he's gonna
think-
probably ask his attorney, and his attorney, if he's any good kind of a good attorney, he's gonna say no. That's just my guess, but I'll ask him.
It's really tying our hands at that point.
We never tried to cause trouble. Never,
Right.
okay? That's not, like the kid said to you, if I start to sink, we stop. Did he say that to you? Do you remember
You
that?
shouldn't be sinking. You shouldn't be in an area where you're going.
But he didn't sink. And he said if we began to, we would, right, that would be it. But the bottom line is it's, okay. Anyway, tomorrow it's done. He just has to put the stuff on the truck and go. That's all.
I think we should be able to go out there and see how it looks.
It's just removing the logs from already stacked by the road.
They're by the, yeah.
They're right near the road, they're not in the wetlands, and I drove by there today, so I know where you're talking about.
Did you? Okay.
Carl?
Yes, I'd like to address your concern that this doesn't seem to have happened before, and I'd like to look at this in two separate things. The first one is that normally people are not logging commercially in a wetlands area or within 100 feet of wetlands. And second, as far as I know, we are getting forestry plans on a regular basis from other people who are doing logging in town. We did get something from the logging that was done up on Nisco, at the top of Nisco Hill earlier this year. Was that true?
Yeah, we have a handful of active
Okay.
forestry plans and many, many years. This has been in place since
Okay.
1930s.
So I'm
Well,
surprised.
how much timber they take out? You know,
Doesn't matter.
They were going up. and
It's
down
over
the road
50
for 2
cords.
Over.
weeks.
over 50 cords.
They were doing.
You need a cutting plan.
They were doing commercial logging, they had a cutting plan, and they did on the backside of the hill down towards the new housing development, they basically took out most everything except for a few trees.
So they did more than 50 cords.
They did a whole lot, yes.
Well, then you gotta have a plan for that.
And
Is
so
that Hemingway's land? Is that Hemingway's land?
it was the very large parcel, the person who was at the very end of Nisco Road.
Yeah, that's Hemingway.
So my question is so you're saying that the logging that you were doing was more limited than that, and so that's why
It's right in the rules book. You can cut right in a wetland if it's frozen or dry conditions. Am I right or wrong about that?
is that what we're hearing from the state?
Yeah, Michael Downey, are you on the call?
Michael is on. Michael, can you unmute?
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Mike. I am your state forester in town, and good to see everybody. So, to kind of frame, why I was invited here is I was called um, earlier this week about logging activity in town that was being asked to be confirmed if there was an approved forest cutting plan or not. And that's kind of where we are in the conversation this evening is inherently there is no forest cutting plan. So in terms of thresholds for filing with the state forester, you guys have accurately depicted that. It's either 25,000 board feet or 50 cords or a combination of that. Under that threshold still doesn't mean that there isn't some process that needs to be performed. The Wetlands Protection Act is in full effect for any activity that's occurring without a forest cutting plan. So there are allowances for work to be done under threshold without a permit. However, if you're in a jurisdictional area to the Wetlands Protection Act, that's why you guys are here this evening, is because you're here to explain why you have not come to this body, this commission, for forestry activity that's jurisdictional to this body. It's not jurisdictional to the state forester because you don't have a permit. And you're attesting to tonight that it's under threshold. So I can't demand a permit from you as the state forester. So you're at a crossroads. The decision is either are you operating these forestry activities within the context of the Wetlands Protection Act? And what this commission has asked you this evening is, in order for them to discern that, there needs to be a site visit. So I would advocate to you, as well as the landowner, that the commission is allowed to make a site visit to determine what the impacts are to the resource areas that they have the care and custody of in their community. So that's my perspective from this.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Two things. 25,000 board feet, 50 cords. I can kind of nudge what 50 cords are. What would a standard log truck carry in board feet? Is that a fair question? And Mr. Downey, or what's?
It's a fair question. It's just, again, it's the terminology. Are we talking about a trailer from Canada or some other type of trailer that's being, trucking that type of wood, or are we looking at a triaxle, center mount, rear mount, cab mounted triaxle log truck, so that those are the conversations. So, if you know what 50 cords are, then you probably know what 25,000 board feet is, because that's basically exactly equal to each other in terms of volume. So, in terms of a log truck, if you were looking at a triaxle, typically you're going to be putting 6 to 8 cords on that triaxle. If it's saw timber sized wood, and there's experts in this room probably really smarter than I'll ever be, you're probably looking at somewhere around 4,000 board feet. So
So we're talking more than 6 truckloads. 6
Likely.
truckloads.
Likely, if it's a triaxle, if it's a Canadian trailer, that's a different conversation.
Fair enough.
And they wouldn't be and they're not taking firewood, to be clear.
One moment, please, Michael. What kind of truck you
There
use?
were no logs taken up, saw logs, just tree length firewood,
What size truck you use?
a triaxle.
Triaxle.
And then just second, I would hope that we can settle this all very amicably so that the owner can sleep well tonight.
Thank you.
And well, that's incumbent upon you playing nice as well. And that we can schedule a site visit, would be my suggestion.
I will encourage him to allow a site visit, but it's not something that I am gonna be able to do here tonight. It's not my land.
So at this point, from what it sounds, if there's no more questions, is there any more questions, Carl?
Yes, are we asking for access just to the Washington Street parcels or also Blackstone Street and the North Avenue area? North Avenue.
Well, they're different owners.
No, they're.
Oh, okay, so,
Well, technically, Blackstone Street is owned by his wife who's in assisted living. So I'm not gonna be able to get anything from her.
that leaves us in a tough place, because if nobody can give answers or access, where does that leave us?
Well, John probably has authority over it, but I'm just saying, as the legal owner, a deeded owner, she's not able to say anything.
This is all this, I'm sorry.
Michael,
Go ahead.
question for you. When it comes to forestry and cutting plans, if the same owner owns multiple properties, is it under the same cutting plan, or is each property individual to a cutting plan?
It would be each individual parcel would have a separate cutting plan. So if they were abutting properties under the same deeded ownership, that could be filed as one cutting plan. However, if you have one piece of property that's 10 acres on one end of a road, and then a mile down the road, there's another 10-acre property, those would be and they're owned by the same landowner, deeded owner, then they would be filed as two separate forest cutting plans. They would have two separate file numbers, just very similarly to how you all do your process. You know,
Okay, at that point, the 25,000 board feet and the 50 cord would be each individual property. So
correct.
yield 100 cord. Well, each property 50 equaling 100.
Yes, they both have the same owners.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry,
Does the neighbor?
do you have questions?
I just had a question about the Wetland Act that was filed. I moved in 3 years ago, so I'm very new to the town and the property. I thought that whole area was wetland, so John and I talked about that on the phone. I don't know anything about how the process or the law works, so I'm just curious for my own benefit, like, where does the wetland start? And I want to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, you're at 57 Washington. It looks like about halfway on your property, you do have wetlands there. So
So I'm, okay.
in Mendon, we protect the wetlands and the 100-foot buffer zone.
Okay.
And then we have a 25-foot no disturb zone and 50-foot no build.
Okay.
So typically, if you're doing work within 100 feet, you need a permit, and there's certain limitations depending on how close you get.
Okay.
No build is at the discretion. Conservation Commission, I believe.
Through a permit.
I was under the impression that it's 25-foot, no build, no exception.
Well, I was sitting in your chair when that came about, and I believe it was, Peter, maybe you can remember, it was at the discretion of the commission. They could change that if they wanted to.
I'd be involved in that or not, sound hard me or.
I'm old, and I don't think it's that good.
The commission is granted the authority to grant a waiver with a permit for the public interest. So it is unlikely that the above no build zone is waived. It should be very scrutinized.
Well,
Yes, to respond further to the person in the audience, we regularly get requests from homeowners asking to get permission to cut down a tree in a buffer zone or in the wetlands because it's about to fall on their house. And we very quickly grant those approvals. So if you ever are concerned about what you are allowed to do on your property, the best thing to do is to call or stop by Isabella's office and discuss with her, and she'll tell you what you would need to ask permission for what she is authorized to grant, what you would come and ask us for permission about.
I mean, that was the basis of my question.
Yeah.
My name is Chris. We're not
and-
interested in you.
And yes, the Mendon bylaw, the way I phrase it is that we are very likely to authorize someone to do something between 50 and 100 foot if they have a good reason for it. We're much less likely to do that between 25 and 50, and we almost never from 0 to 25. Not that we are prohibited from doing it, but you'd have to convince a whole lot of us that it's a really good reason to do it.
That's a little bit off topic, so
Yeah.
let's get back to,
Okay.
these gentlemen, get them out of here for a late dinner.
So we'll find out tomorrow whether we have permission to schedule a site visit. Or
Well-
we don't all need to go, right? I don't know.
What do we want to do tonight is the question. Do we want to allow them to keep cutting? Do we want to allow them to stop?
Cutting has already stopped. It stopped 3 days ago, 2 days ago.
Oh,
No one's cutting anything.
Well, they're bringing out the wood with the forward that they cut.
Right, they're bringing out what was already cut at the time that it came to everybody's.
Right, so they're still running over the potential wetlands and whatnot. So that's only trying to get a baseline.
He doesn't have to drive over anything. You've seen the truck. He can reach over and grab stuff. I mean, he doesn't have to do that.
Only trying to get a baseline, Gary.
Yeah, I understand.
So I'll entertain a motion from anybody for any reason.
I'd like to repeat my question. Are we asking for authorization to do site visits on all 3 parcels or just one? How do people, what does people feel about that before we make a motion?
If there are wetlands on all 3 sites, then we should probably go to all 3 sites.
Okay. And, so.
Isabel, are there wetlands on all 3 sites? Okay.
So my response to Gary talking about cutting has been ceased. I would be interested in having an enforcement order that codifies that you were agreeing to, that basically says that you're not going to do any more cutting. And if you've stipulated that you've done that already, it shouldn't be that, it's not like we're being punitive or we're just,
I have advised Jim accordingly, and I
Okay.
believe he's agreeing to that.
They're just bringing the wood out.
okay. So I would be comfortable asking to have an enforcement order written saying that no more logging should take place until such time as the Conservation Commission is able to evaluate the sites, which may be a long time if we don't get permission to do a site.
It's all done. It won't need to, it's over.
I'd still like to get an enforcement order to,
No.
in case you changed your mind later on down the line.
What does that involve?
No, because I'm trying to get, I prefer to get consensus from people so I can be careful about what the motion is. And then we don't have to fuss about amending my motion.
I would just want to clarify,
Okay, sorry.
in my mind, I heard 2 different things out of your mouth. You said no logging versus no cutting. Sounds like all the cutting has been done,
Right,
but it sounds like there's still the need to remove the logs, which might require going back and forth over a wetland, which is more problematic to me. And so I would encourage that no work being done within the wetland until we've been able to visit the site. So I would encourage them to move as quick as
There's
possible.
no delineation features.
Right.
How does anybody specifically want to know where the wetland starts and where the wetlands begins?
Right, so maybe.
In the absence of wetland flagging, we are forced to rely on mapper and the near maps that we have from previous years showing where the wetlands are. And because of those observations, that's why you're here tonight, because we believe that you're within that area, those resource areas.
and there's a seminar coming up, February 28th about wetland plants and how to delineate them in the winter months.
Under TV.
I want to see you doing that.
Well,
So what I'm looking for from anybody is a description of what they want. Do they want all logging and lumberjack activities stopped? Do they want to allow these guys to take the logs off property? Do they want it delineated before anything? Do they want to cease and desist? What does this board want?
I think we make it very simple.
I have a question for. Are there still logs on the interior of the site or are
Yes.
the logs on the road?
They're
Okay,
down, they just have to be brought out.
okay.
He's using a forwarder, not a skidder. Do you know what that is?
Well, again.
It's a rubber tire machine that has a.
He is not-
They load them into.
He is not making any ruts. You're gonna see that tomorrow.
Okay.
No ruts.
Very impressed at the site that, you know, see, there didn't seem to be
You
any disturbance
couldn't-
in the soil.
You
How
know,
do we know unless we can get on property and
I
look?
guess let's see from the road.
I would like,
do you want me to bring him in?
I can't do anything without John's permissions.
You know, I came here for another reason tonight, and can we talk about it?
Let's get this done first.
All right.
can I agree with you and I agree with you, and I would suggest to this commission that if we keep the logging from occurring, the broad term of logging, they may encourage the property owner to give access for the site visit. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm perfectly okay with them removing the logs that are already out by the road.
Even if they're
Right, I'm okay with that.
transporting them through wetlands?
No, the logs
That's
by the road.
that's the question.
Oh, by the
How are you
road.
gonna- How are you going to enforce them to go in and take more out? Unless someone's standing there watching.
And we have no recourse in that case, unless we have an enforcement order that says. no
So,
activity.
and again, I agree that, you know, the ones in the road, they're not gonna be in the wetlands.
Are you asking how we would enforce a no work in the wetlands? I guess from the street, we could probably see if we think it's in the wetlands, right? If have roughly an area from a map where the wetlands are, that could be enforced. I don't-
Can I just be, I have to say 3 words, 23 Cape Road. We didn't have an enforcement order, what happened? Nothing.
You're looking for somebody to entertain a motion.
Make a motion that just very simply, there's an enforcement order that says no activity until we have eyes on the site.
I'm looking for a second. Is there a second?
A second time.
All right, so a motion's been made and seconded to stop all work. Discussion, Carl?
I move to have amend the previous motion to allow them to remove the logs that are already on the side of the road that are clearly not in any wetlands area.
I'll
You
second.
all right with that? Is that what you just said?
That's what I just said.
Okay, yeah.
I'm trying to, her motion was to not allow any.
She doesn't want anything to go on.
Right. and I'm
Okay, I know what's going on. But anyway,
I will second the amendment.
Okay.
okay, all right. Well,
We got,
you know, I just try to make $1 out of this stuff. I'm not trying to ruin the place. And I've been through this before. I have.
Okay.
I know some people in here, they don't want to see anything happen.
Let's let us get.
Okay, all right.
Parliamentary process, get the motion.
so
taken care
do we have to,
Vote on the
of.
amendment.
Yes.
Discuss the amendment.
so an amendment to the motion has been made to allow the trees that are down and near the road to be removed.
Be excluded from the enforcement order. Yes.
Any discussion?
Yes, I would feel more comfortable doing a drive-by. I don't know anything about the properties or these logs by the road or in sort of a ditch or a stream or it's a stream or anything.
No, no.
And how we know.
If you're gonna drive by tonight, no.
Yeah, sure, on the spot.
Well, it's.
Did you want to know if there's a stream?
Oh, I know, fine.
There's no streams.
She's not taking Bob's word. She's certainly not gonna take yours.
There's nothing to hide, you know, if there was something to hide, we wouldn't be there.
Move the question on the amendment.
So, all right, so, discussion, I'm gonna say it's over. Any discussion from the audience?
They will discuss on the amendment.
Oh.
If I could ask the commission a favor, Chair, that would be something I would like to ask.
Go ahead, Mike.
If I could get the names of the loggers who are actually doing the work, just so I think mainly for our purposes from state forester perspective. You know, I think we are concerned that folks are doing work that are unlicensed in the state, that are claiming to be doing commercial forestry activities, which requires a Massachusetts timber harvester's license. So from a state forester perspective, knowing individuals and their names and their businesses that are putting forth themselves as licensed timber harvesters or not, it would be good information for the state forester to be aware of, just so if this comes up in another community with these same individuals, the state forester can then take some action against either their license or take action against them not having a license.
Let me see if I
Want
can
to speak, Mike? I'll tell you who I am.
Sure,
Can you hear me?
I can.
Jim McCarthy.
What's Cobb's name?
The guy running the machine, his name is David Cobb.
Okay,
And I called Tesla down in Pittsfield. She
okay.
lined me up down in South Carver, a test for the 26th. I know that doesn't mean I have the license right now, but
Well,
we
it
said,
does if you've submitted your application and have provided the state a check. Yes, under the law, you would be licensed at that point until the
She said-
test.
I think she said you could do a pending license, is that right?
Well, I just said what I told you what the law says, which is basically you submit an application for your license. You write a check to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. When we receive that, you are now legal to operate as a timber harvester in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts until the next licensed harvester exam. So when you do that, if you have done that, congratulations, you may be a licensed timber harvester now until you take the test and pass it, obviously.
Jim, is your check cleared from the state yet?
No.
So technically.
Is it still Joe Perry down there or is it somebody else?
That would be Jim Raspin likely issuing you the test in South Carver. But you know, the main point I'm trying to make here is realistically, there's two things, I guess. One is, I hope the commission understands, and I hope it's very clear that if you're cutting trees, there's a likelihood you'll need a permit from someone, either the state forester or your local conservation commission, because the likelihood of that activity, whether they're commercial forestry activities or something else, the likelihood that that's occurring within a regulated resource area is fairly high in this state. So in this specific circumstance, because there's no cutting plan, it is fully under the jurisdiction of any of the activities that have occurred on site that is jurisdictional to your body, is fully under the purview of the Wetlands Protection Act. So any crossings of wetlands, all that stuff, that is regulated by you, as well as any type of cutting of vegetation in the buffer strips and in the wetlands, because those activities are highly regulated in this state. Under a forest cutting plan, things are done differently because it's considered agricultural. So without that forest cutting plan, you're under the full weight of the Wetlands Protection Act. And that is your responsibility here this evening, is to determine what that means to your community and what that means moving forward. So that's the first point. The second point is that if you have folks that are advocating for either personal use, that's a different conversation. That was opened earlier and very clear. There are thresholds for personal use under the Wetlands Protection Act for harvesting activities that are for personal purposes. However, when you stretch into the commercial realm, that now involves not only the potential for a forest cutting plan from the state forester or a permit issued by the Conservation Commission, but also requires a license to do that activity on those land or on that land. You need to be a licensed timber harvester. So, these are the things that we're very concerned about, because when folks are doing things that are inherently not aligned with what the law requires and demands, and on top of it are doing it without the proper licensing, it creates an erosion of trust within the forestry community. And I personally will not stand for that. And that's my strong position. I take my profession very seriously. I take the work that's done in the woods, and I support all the work that's done in the woods, even the stuff I don't agree with. But that stuff is done legally and with a permit issued by the state forester. This situation was not. And
Thank you, Mike.
the consequence for that is what you're going to determine. Thank you.
Thank you. Let Isabella speak first, please.
A question for Jim. Have you had issues with other conservation commissions in Massachusetts under the Wetland Protection Act?
There was a problem in Millbury.
And how was that resolved?
Oh, really?
How?
Oh, how?
Mhm.
There was it went from dry to wet, and then there was a crossing with a culvert. And I used that instead of going where I was before. But they thought that wasn't right, and they had some problems, and it ended. We just ended it, and that's what he wanted. He just wanted me to stop, so we stopped.
And was the landowner required to do restoration on
Yeah, he
that
did it.
property?
Yeah, there was a little bit that he did with the backhoe.
So,
Could I,
Eric,
yeah, I wonder if before we vote, could we ascertain whether there are wetlands along the road?
I mean, this image, to me, it appears there is, but it's cut a lot of snow and I can't make any determinations. But I think this image here is very clear that, very likely could be. It's at least very wet in this photograph.
Chairman, may I ask?
go ahead, Neil.
Mike, if you're still there. Are you saying that he doesn't have a license to do what he's doing right now? So if he does any more work, is he not licensed to do the work?
I don't have the jurisdiction to tell him to work or not to work at this point. If he was under a permit with me, he would not have the ability to work. Unless I had confirmation from Tessa, who is part of the licensing board here in Massachusetts. Tom Ryan is the secretary. They are both located in the Pittsfield office at DCR. And I'll give you what I would be doing here. If there was a permit issued by the state forester and I came on site and there was an approved cutting plan and there was folks operating without a license, at that point they would be shut down. They would be issued a stop order until they went through the permit, went through the licensing process, which is, there's not a lower bar on planet Earth to get a license as a timber harvester. You send in an application, you don't even need to take the test, and you write a check, and you become instantly granted a license to cut trees down in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So there's zero excuse for anybody to be operating commercially on land that's to remain forested. And that's a huge important factor here. If this was something about development, I wouldn't be at this meeting. If this is land to be remaining forested and it's commercially being harvested, you are required to have a license. And the reality is, that is my job. If they're operating without a license on land that has a permit from the state forester, then they cannot operate that land until they're licensed.
But they don't have a permit, do they?
They do not have a permit issued from me. No.
Let's check.
Okay,
Let's check.
hold on. I have a question.
Michael, what makes the difference between, land being forested, and left as forest land and land being forested for development?
That's a great question and a very important one and because that is the main driver of why the erosion of trust occurs here in the state around tree cutting. Because the same equipment that cuts trees down, that in terms of forest management and all the wonderful work that can be done with forestry, that same equipment does the same exact thing when they're clearing for a development, right? And there's a lot of confusion, but there shouldn't be, because it's very clear under the Wetlands Protection Act, as well as other land disturbance permits or bylaws you may have, or the stormwater bylaw in town, or whatever other protections you have. It's very clear, if you're cutting trees on land that is going to remain forested and it's being done commercially, that is done through a permitting process through the state forester. If you're cutting trees just to cut trees, could be for pre-development, could be for solar, could be for a parking lot, what have you. If it's a change of use, there's only one entity that is, there's a board in town that is going to be jurisdictional to that activity. Could be you, because it might be close to a wetland or a river, right? It could be part of the River Protection Act jurisdictional lands. It could be part of zoning or some other, land use board within your community. I don't know your structure in town. For us, in the town I live in, we have bylaws around stormwater. So disturbances over a certain amount trigger stormwater permitting. If you're within jurisdictionals to wetlands, obviously you need permitting through that, et cetera, et cetera. So I get a lot of calls where, why don't you just let them do a cutting plan? Well, that erodes the agricultural exemption. The agricultural exemption gives great freedom in the Wetlands Protection Act. There's things you can do with the agricultural exemption with a forest cutting plan that in your wildest dreams you would never think about allowing under a notice of intent. Cutting within 200 feet of a river, right? A perennial stream. Cutting in wetlands. Cutting up to the bank of a stream. Those are all allowed under the exemption and under a forestry permit. But you would never allow that under your NOI. So that's why we take that very seriously. We do not want to cross that line ever, because that agricultural exemption gives great freedom, because it's inherently a temporary disturbance versus conversion, which is really forever, right? So, that's why we take this stuff very seriously in the forestry world. We don't want to be brought into the conversation about development, because it's agriculture, and we make that very clear with our permitting. And if people choose to play in the gray area, they choose to go down a path where, it's not going to be really pleasant for them.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
One, with that new information, I'm less inclined to support the amendment and maybe just keep it easier to hopefully get this resolved ASAP. You get your check in, we get the right to go and review it, and you can be working on Monday. Your check doesn't bounce. And
Next day, yeah.
And then.
You don't want me to work there?
No, what I'm saying is, get your check in next day, yeah.
The second point, and I just, to you, Mike, again, going forward, we can either go this as wetlands, and then if there are wetlands there, they got disturbed, and we gotta go through all the 9 yards, I guess, not quite sure, if asking for a notice of intent. It versus could a forest cutting plan be developed after it's already been done?
No.
So that's not, you missed that opportunity. So now they gotta come under those stronger laws of no cutting in the wetland.
All right, so at this point, again, we're gonna not belabor this, we're gonna look forward to. Is the amendment supported by a second?
Yeah, you got second, Peter second.
No, I've withdrawn my second.
You can't,
The amendment. Can't withdraw my amendment, Mike? Okay,
you can vote against it.
all right, continue.
So we're back to the other.
So we're voting on an amendment to allow roadside logging to continue, but nothing beyond the roadside.
There's no
Removal
second,
of the log was the motion, removal of the logs by the road.
there's no second to that motion.
He wouldn't allow me to withdraw it, so.
So the only way to stop the amendment is to vote against it. So at this point, there's been a motion and an amendment to the motion to allow work. The amendment is to allow work, removing the previously cut trees near the road and get them out. So at this point, I'm gonna ask for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
You don't need to do roll call.
No.
Okay, so,
So you just call for all opposed and then everybody else will.
okay, all opposed?
Yeah.
And motion
Motion fails.
fails. Okay, so now the original motion was to stop all work. All those in favor?
Aye.
You're not gonna let him take the wood out.
You're not gonna let me take the wood off the side of the road?
Not until you get your permit.
That's not what the motion says.
Well, that's what the forest is saying, that he does not recommend that work be continued without the.
Do you realize that's how we make our money?
Okay, the issue, if I may, Mr. Chair, the motion is to stop work. If we do the site visit quickly, we have the ability to review and
It can be as early as Monday. He's just gotta get his check into the forestry department, and then as soon as it clears, he can start working.
She's
It does
sending,
not come
let me
to
say
Christmas.
something. She's sending me an application in the mail. The application, I haven't even, then I'm gonna send the check, okay, if I have to drive down there, because now what's happening is you're capturing the wood that we work for to make our money, to pay our bills. I don't see what the problem is in having the truck take the wood out of there. There's still wood out there that has to be picked up by the forwarder, it brought out.
And that's what we're trying to stop.
What about the wood on the side of the road, Bob? They just have to put in a truck.
Practically, they're working from the street.
It's a street, blacktop.
You seem to have a misconception about what the motion is. The motion has nothing at all to do with whether he is licensed or not. The Conservation Commission doesn't care whether he's licensed or not. We care about whether work was done within the buffer zone. And my interpretation from what I've heard from the state representative is, since there's no forestry plan, he is not entitled to an agricultural exemption.
Correct.
Which means that if during a sidewalk, we go in and observe that the wetlands was disturbed, we get to do the exact same enforcement work that we've done at other sites in town where people have gone in and blown out wetland areas, thinking of one in particular. So the goal is not to say whether he gets licensed or not. Whether he's licensed or not has nothing at all to do with the enforcement order. The enforcement order is to say he cannot do any work until such time as we go and get a site visit and are able to see for ourselves whether the wetlands and the resource areas have been adversely impacted.
What are you saying, Carol?
I thought we voted.
Well,
Well, you're saying take the wood off the street?
No,
I tried to allow that and I got out.
They don't want to allow you, Carol. Okay.
The current motion is that they do not want any more activity with you doing anything at all with machinery or moving logs or anything until such time as the site visit occurs.
Let me address Peter's withdrawal of his second. Peter, you said that the reason why you you drew your amendment.
Chairman, we already voted.
You already voted. Discussion, no discussion.
There is that.
What do you want me to do with the logs? It's right next to the road.
Leave them there
Just, I,
For how long?
Yeah,
until we have a site visit.
well, I'll see you at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
You'll see me, as soon as the property owner gives you permission to tell me that I can go on his land.
He soon was there.
I couldn't understand a word you said, but anyway,
Moving the lot. Sorry.
so. Motion's been made and seconded. It's been approved to stop all work. It doesn't. It's not a popular opinion for you.
I'll tell you what, it's not showing me any amicability as Peter had referenced earlier, so. We'll see what happens. Let's go.
so we're not gonna talk about the future, right? Future looks pretty bleak.
Let,
Oh, yes.
you
I mean, there's a few people, let's say again.
you can if you want. It's not on the schedule.
Well,
You
let me just say-
Hold it until, March 12th.
Did you get the email from Kimball Moore?
I did.
Okay.
So,
Mike, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
You know Kimball Moore as a
I
forester?
do.
He's a good
Yes.
guy, and he's been around for a while. I've known him since '85, since Rick Johnson was a forester. So, he wants to get involved with this in the future. I was here 21 years ago, and I did the town forest all by myself. Was here for a year and a half, and I didn't destroy the place. I made nice trails all over the place. It looks pretty good to me. And I did so now I'm coming back. I went over there about 2 months ago and walked through there. It's all overgrown. And I would like to go back and do it again with a plan. Oh, yes, that's about 100. That's about 150 acres, right? The town forest or more. So I talked to Kimball, Mike, and he wants to do the management plan and the cutting plan. He's working hand in hand with another guy. So I'm here tonight, well, and now I'm here and I can't even make any money. I did logs of. I
so
don't,
you've already logged, North Ave and Blacksmith Street, haven't you?
yeah, but I want to get paid for the firewood that's on the street. That's all.
Right, and according to Michael, all you need to do is get a check to him and.
Can we clarify which agenda topic we're on? Do we move on to number 6?
Yeah, let me just, can I just be very clear about where my role is? Like, so what is going on right now with specifically the harvesting that was done without a permit from the state forester? It it has no bearing on him being licensed or not. All right, that I can't force him to get a license. What was I heard earlier is very accurate, which is basically you're there to you guys are here to review what the activities were. Did they occur jurisdictionally to this commission? And if the activities did occur in jurisdictional areas within your purview, was there any impact to those wetlands and resource areas? And if so, what is the mitigation and what, and that's what I think I heard I heard the vote on with regard to the enforcement order. So when it comes to the timber harvesting license, please just ignore that at this point. There's no bearing with what Jim is doing and Mr. Cobb with regard to this specific conversation. And I personally could care less about the license because I have no dog in that fight. Jurisdictionally, I can't demand a license because I don't have jurisdiction on the property right now. And
Michael,
probably,
what if it is determined on a site visit that there is more than 50 cord or 25,000 board feet?
so right now, I would just encourage everybody to look very closely at the memorandum of understanding between DCR and the Department of Environmental Protection from 2018. And that outlines very nicely what our relationship should be between the state forester, the local conservation commission, and DEP. And how when these things do occur, and they occur, I won't say they occur very frequently, but they do occur, how we use collaboration and teamwork to resolve them to best adhere to the interests of the act, which is the act we're talking about is the Wetlands Protection Act, not the Forest Cutting Practices Act. Okay. So what we'd like to see, and you've probably heard this from your circuit rider, you've probably heard it from DEP, is to paper it properly and to bring it under compliance. And that process can look completely uniquely your community, right? So it could involve me, right? It could be that you decide, hey, Mike, you seem to be a really smart guy. Can you help us get this into compliance? We'd really like to see if we could do a retroactive filing for a forest cutting plan. Is that possible? And we have that conversation. Or you decide, hey, Mike, you seem like a really nice guy, but we think we got all the tools we need to do our enforcement and mitigation. We'll contact you if we have any questions. Or it could be a combination of those or something completely different. But as I've said to Isabella earlier, is, my role here is to support you and your community. And my role is your state forester. I'm here as your local resource as a licensed forester to help and to answer questions specifically that I'm aware of jurisdictionally within my confines of my world as a forester. So I would say that if you want to review that and make your site visit, I would strongly encourage that. Obviously, if you see something that looks like, man, this is really complicated, I might need somebody to maybe weigh in on the forestry part, then let's have that conversation, because we have retroactively issued permits, forest cutting plans on projects that have gone kind of sideways like this, right? But that has to be an agreed upon conversation. I can't ride in on my horse and tell you that we're going to issue a retroactive cutting plan. One, I think you'd probably say you'd probably have a few choice words for me. And that's not how I approach my work. This is not my community. I don't live in your community, obviously. I care a lot about your community because I'm your state forester and I care about the forests and the wetlands and everything else. So I just want to get it to a point where it's papered properly, whether it's through your process or a combination of processes. And then Jim moves ahead, the landowner moves forward. We all kind of, the resources, the interests of the act, the Wetlands Protection Act are maintained, which is inherently why I'm here tonight, because the forest cutting practices is embedded within that as the agricultural exemption. So the interests of the act are the interests of the cutting as well. So, I'm here to support whatever you need. If a cutting plan is something the community wants to think about and consider, we can go down that path. But that's your decision.
Mike, can I stop a second? So Mike, this license thing with me, this is all right with you?
The licensing, I don't like, yeah, there's nothing I have to say about it. As I've said I've said my piece about the license. It's I don't have a dog in that fight. If you had a cutting plan with me, we'd have a different conversation, Jim, and I think
Well,
what
yeah,
that.
we're gonna have a cutting plan, because I'm hopeful that in the future, unless it's wasting my time completely, but I'll get he knows who Kimball Moore is. He's been around for a long, long time, like I have, and I would like to try to go back down to the forest, the town forest, and do some work down there. He'll back the trees, he'll put boundaries, stream, everything, perfect. It's a big job. It has to have a cutting plan.
Okay. Just so everybody knows, I have agenda number 5. has been voted on. It's been put to bed. We don't need to discuss it anymore. We're on item number 6, which is town forest. I don't think you're gonna get an answer tonight, because
No,
we
I
don't
don't.
have an answer, and you don't have a cutting.
Well, can I come back? Well, I have to get an answer from you that you would even consider. Yes, Carl?
The town forest is town-owned land, which means that it's highly likely that the select board would need to look and see and authorize that particular activity. They ask us for input, but as the executive body of the town.
I'll talk to them.
And the reason is because if you're going to be making money on it, they might want to say, put it out for an open bid if there are other people who are interested in logging the town.
Well, you know what? I'm the one that unearthed this. I did it 21 years ago. I took a ride down there 2.5 months ago. The place is completely overgrown. And so I brought it up. And
Okay.
that's why I'm here. So, you know, whatever I know it will take a while to get it figured out. But I don't know what to do. Should I even try to come back here again? I mean, maybe some
Reach
people
out to
here
the
have already
select
made their
board.
mind up that this guy's gonna get nothing done here. Maybe, I don't
Reach out to
know.
the select board and see where they stand.
I don't think the, the commission is responsible for forest cutting plans. You have to decide if you are interested in having forest cutting plans. We should really have forest cutting management plans on all of our properties. So do we need to inventory our properties and decide on which one first? And then the proper procedures to make sure we vetted the person,
Yeah.
who gets the job appropriately and following any procedures we have to follow. But
Campbell said he would make a management plan, not on all 600 acres. I can't, that's a lot of money. But he said I can cut it down to like 100 acres. He'll do the management plan first, and then a cutting plan afterwards. But who do I talk to? Is it this place or the
One
board
moment, Jim.
of select?
I neglected to let Leah speak, so I'm gonna let her speak now.
If he wants to do this, he's got to go through all the proper channels.
Every single one. I will.
That, through the channels, you get your answer.
Peter, you remember me from 20 years ago, don't you?
I do.
You remember that time up at Inman Hill Road, not Inman, Misco Spring? I said, go on down there and take a look. And you came back and you said you did a good job. I remember that.
21 years ago, I remember there was some concerns about.
There was a lot of.
That was a long time ago.
That was 21 years.
So I'm not sure of the process. I thought it was pretty clear that the Concom was in control, but I don't know if as likely we should. Traditionally, it's the landowner that pays for the forester, your forester, you pay for the cutting plan, and then they hire.
Yeah, I'm coming right out.
They mark.
I just wanted to talk to them
They put
about
out
the
bid
future.
For the cut. But
that's my
Oh,
understanding.
dude, all right, I
So
gotta
We
go.
would have a forest plan written for us and then put it out.
I gotta go.
so, yeah, this will
I
be
think
continued.
Gannett is ready to, I don't know.
No, that's fine.
Now, the guy doesn't deserve it. No, he don't. He's a good friend of mine in Gary's. He said, go ahead, all right? It was not a big job. It was, below zero for a week. We went over there real quick. There's not a lot of wood. That's all. Yeah. I'll talk. You wanna talk again? Can I come back? About the
Yeah,
future?
but I'm gonna, I thought you said you wanted to be on the March 12th meeting.
If you can schedule a site visit beforehand, I think we can act.
Well, he's asking about the town forest. If he
Well,
can
not
come back,
separated that.
yes, but that's what he's asking
I would
about.
expect you to come back, we will have a discussion about the town forest and a management plan. However, first of all, if you want a chance at all of getting work that done, I would suggest that you encourage that the site visit happens as quick as possible.
Yes, I'm not against it because I have nothing to hide.
Well, then you go convince me.
And Mike, what's his name there, that comes here, he said, wait till I come back from Florida. So he said, all right, I don't know,
So let's.
make it the 12th. After this is done here, this little job, I have no more work.
Well, let's get this resolved quickly then.
Let's get it out, get it done, that's all. All right, you wanna put me down for the 12th? 7 o'clock?
Work with Isabella and she'll make sure I'm getting with a future.
That's a meeting.
You still want that quarter wood? Yeah, you're asking for the quarter wood?
I was saying, if you had any left. If we could continue the discussion, I think the town does own quite a few bits of forestry property.
I think it makes sense to reach out. to-
Have proactive management plan, and then we can decide whether they want to get into a cutting plan.
My understanding is we have an expired forest management plan in the town forest. So in my opinion, it's, as I've understood how other towns do it, it's our responsibility to refresh that plan and then potentially ask for proposals, whether the work is under, $10,000 or $50,000 threshold, if we can do 3 proposals, otherwise we're gonna look at, more bid aspect structures, but maybe, I don't know if Mike has
My question,
experience with that with other communities, the proper procedure, but my understanding, the town has the forest management plan.
Isabella, my question to that is, and maybe Mike can answer this, is if somebody's coming in here and logging the town's forest, which the taxpayers pay for this town land,
Exactly.
what does the town get out of them getting all the wood off of the land?
You make them, it's some sort of, benefit to them for the service, so they get some portion, but we would get some amount of revenue.
Right,
But
so-
that's not the purpose for us.
100 acres or 600 acres, there's gonna be a substantial amount of capital gain then.
The town received that 21 years ago.
Can we separate these two things because the one follows the other?
We did say,
A forest management plan is what we should be looking at. That may talk about cutting in the future, but that's a separate act under whatever that plan is. So that's where you, certainly you need the select board. You don't want to go out and just say, oh yeah, go cut the wood. But a forest management plan is what is the initial thing that is needed. And he's talking about that for a portion of the town forest, not the whole. All right, because if the guy who's gonna do the forest management plan would come in here and tell us how he's gonna do the forest management plan, that's a productive discussion for this commission to have.
right, and does everybody have the same opinion of it should be for all of the forest land, whether it be all in 1 year or not? It could be.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
we do not have this on the agenda.
It is on the
Yeah, it
agenda,
is.
6, town forest.
Of course.
Yes, but we're now talking about not just for the town forest, but a forestry plan for other areas.
Well, I'm not.
Isn't that
Oh, okay.
town forest?
I
Let's take them one at a time.
Yeah,
There's
I'm
lots
not.
of other conservation land in the town that the Concom is responsible for that we would, Isabella is recommending that we also get forestry management plans.
Well, they probably all should ultimately have forestry management plans, but
But that costs-
you can only do what you can do.
Right, but it may cost money in today, but when the project is done, then you recoup that.
Yes, and I just wanted to be clear, it sounded like he was proposing that he was going to pay for the forest management plan and then get the money on, and that.
Yeah, and no, I didn't agree with that.
But that's all.
So anyways, so again, Mike, I would like to have other conversations later. Doesn't have to be tonight, but I mean, I would appreciate your knowledge and guidance in future endeavors as far as how residential and commercial forestry should be done.
Thank you.
Great.
Is that-
Yeah, my door is open at any point. If you guys would like me to come back for another meeting, I could honestly show up there in person if that would, I'm not as intimidating in person maybe as I am on Microsoft Teams, but yeah, however you want to utilize my services, my services are always, free and really you can use them as much as you need. So just to kind of give you just an idea of kind of my my background is, this is something that's really important, in terms of stewarding your town-owned lands, you know, you have the care and custody of those lands. You made some decisions previously about getting some planning document done, a management plan done on the town forest. We would, from a service forester perspective, we always would recommend that's a great first step in better understanding and better caring for the lands that you care for. So please, you know, take advantage of, you know, of all the money that's available to your town through either the service forestry program or others that I can connect you with. So, you know, we have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to support planning in communities, and we spend a substantial amount of taxpayer dollars supporting communities just like yours to get their planning documents done. So we'd love to work with your town, and love to work with your community. And then, you know, once that plan is in place, it does open up other opportunities for funding and financial assistance. So if you have things that are a concern in town, maybe there's some invasive species on town forest that really are kind of getting out of hand. There's programming to support that from the state, you know, and that door opens when you have a plan on the property. So, you know, there's a lot of really positive things about the planning process. You know, you can take it in many different directions. There's some communities that make it very similar to the kind of the open space and recreation planning process. So makes it, you know, fully transparent, fully public process. And then there's communities that do it differently, you know, where they put the project out to bid. A consulting forester is hired through a public process, and then the work gets done for the planning within the at the committee level. And then that plan is then, you know, is brought to the public in a draft process and in a public presentation to draft that, to bring that draft plan to the public at a meeting just like this. And then feedback is taken from the community at that point, and then revisions, if necessary, are made, and then a final presentation is made to the community about the plan. You know, there's many different methods to kind of promulgate that planning process. I personally like it, maybe not the open space and recreation intensive type. I like presentations and getting feedback from public meetings, and then making modifications to the plan based upon that if necessary. Excuse me. So, you know, I offline, I can walk you through kind of many examples of what I think is a thoughtful process. But I think starting with the conversation you're having tonight and thinking about it, and then thinking strategically that if you do decide to implement activities on the town forest land and that's revenue positive, is there a way to retain that revenue, right? And there's great examples. I have some very great friends in other communities that have great examples of warrant articles that make sure that when activities that generate revenue on open space land that the Conservation Commission has care and custody of, that money is retained at the commission level, and it does not go back into the town general fund. So there's some really great mechanisms to make sure that if you do make some revenue on some of the forest activities, that then you can then reinvest it into other things. It could be signage, it could be trails, it could be invasive species work, it could be tree planting, meadow restoration. I mean, there's a million things that are really exciting to think about, pollinator habitat. So not to say that the money can't go back to the general fund, but if you have a good use for it on your conservation lands, I'd much rather see it retained revenue warrant article to be considered.
Does
Yes.
it matter a forestry plan, whether it's private conservation use land or Metacomet conservation use land?
Land trust, you mean?
Yeah. Got a comment, land trust?
So land trusts have the, will get the same, kind of speech that I just gave, which is, they recognize the importance of planning documents. And, I think they recognize also that those planning documents do open up doors to funding as well, just like it does for a municipality. So we always like to see folks to start with a plan because I think it allows folks to kind of better engage with that open space, better understand the resources that are there, and then allows for just some really wise planning and thoughtful planning about, next steps. And, so from my perspective, I'd love anybody who cares about trees to have a forest management plan or a forest stewardship plan, no matter what the size. If you want to know a little bit more about what's going on in the forest, um, really that planning document helps to understand that, and then it allows you to kind of observe and monitor that over time, with that baseline document. So
Thank you.
you're
Mr.
welcome.
Chair, if I could, while I'm still here, if the town had a management plan 25 years ago, what do you think it would cost to refresh that, or you got to start new for, say, 250 acres? Is that 5,000, 20,000, 10,000?
Things are broken.
Well, I understand the need for a plan, but how much is it going to cost roughly, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, every conversation really starts with that, right? How much is it going to cost? So I can tell you what the state would be willing to invest in that, through our cost share program. And I can't give you the exact number, but I can give you the formula to derive that number. But it's basically $1,140, plus $16 an acre over 36 acres. So for that 250, you're probably looking somewhere in the mid to high $3,000 range, maybe into the fours, would be my guess with that formula. And don't obviously quote me because I don't have my calculator with me, but to answer your question in the most government way I can is that in many cases that cost share formula is going to pay for the plan in its entirety about 75% of the time. So it really requires, what we generally recommend with any project, and you probably are going to get this from the town elders as well, is, get a few bids, right, to see who's the most expensive, who's not the most expensive, and then get some references of who's going to be best, to serve your community. Because the forester choice is really probably, I'll be honest with you, is probably the most important decision in the whole process. Because you want to work with somebody that you respect and care for. The forester should be somebody that asks a lot of questions and listens first and foremost, and understands what your community's needs are for that plan. So, important decision is the forester, probably the most important decision, I would say. And then I would say that cost share money, I guarantee you, and maybe I shouldn't say that on public record, but I would guarantee there's somebody you will talk to who will do the plan for what the cost share rate is. They'll say, yeah, I'll do it for the cost share. And then there's going to be, just like somebody who's you have invited over to look at renovating a bathroom or building a deck, you're going to get bids all over the place. You're going to have somebody that will come in at probably $12,000 for 250 acres, possibly. They may be really good, you'd have to weigh that against the person who can do it for the cost, what the financial assistance that's coming from the state is, so depends on how much detail you like. I'm a map guy, so I like really detailed maps. Maybe the community is more about the narrative. Maybe you want a really eloquent writer and captures all the wonderful elements of the forest in a great narrative form. you know, I can't tell you what is best suited for your community, but you want you want a forester that has worked with a community before, you know, with a municipality. Foresters that work with private landowners or even land trusts are dramatically different than what you need to be as a forester when you're working with a municipality. It's just, there's more demands on your time. There's a public process to it. You need to be able to present in public really well and thoughtfully and be able to take feedback from the community and implement that into documents or work on the ground. So it's not, it's really a different approach to forestry when you're working for a municipality as a forester.
Like, we'll be talking with you more. I'm gonna continue the meeting. So that
Okay.
way, these guys here will attend.
I understand.
I do appreciate all of your input and your knowledge. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great evening.
Okay, agenda number 8.
Seven.
Seven, Conservation Land Planning Subcommittee discussion.
Okay. So that your memory is refreshed. When I came on, I was asked by Isabella if we could get together and do some helpful things on planning for some of the conservation areas. We brought to you a PowerPoint outlining a process. At that point, Carl suggested that we probably should check with the select board because this community likes to do task forces and standing committees. That has been done. Isabella went to the select board meeting in January. And what they basically told her is, and I'm going to paraphrase what they said, but it's basically what they said, is we have too many committees and too many task forces in this town. So do what you're going to do the way you're doing it, which is okay, except we are not doing it in any manner or form. We have no charter. We have no discussion about what our obligations are with regard to Open Public Meeting Act things. We don't really know how we would discuss with citizens of Mendon what we are doing and why and under what authority. So what we had met the other day and what we're suggesting to you is that the commission formally create a subcommittee for conservation area land planning. That subcommittee would include the present 3 of us who are doing this at this point in time, plus up to 4 associate members. And associate members are those who do not have voting privileges, but do have certain talents that could be beneficial. Some of you will recall when I interviewed here before you, there was a young woman who was an environmental ed teacher at the school. That's kind of an associate position that might be interesting to have on a subcommittee like that because they have access and ties in the educational community. And certainly part of this planning process deals with educating citizens of Mendon about the areas that they have. So what we're asking you to do tonight is not create anything, but to inform the select board by a motion, which I will offer shortly, that you are considering the establishment of a subcommittee pending the select board's consent for that to occur. And that committee will would be a resolution to establish that committee would be brought back to you after the select board gives the blessing to that, if indeed they do.
Any questions?
Did the select board already tell you to go do it?
Pardon me?
My paraphrase of what I heard Isabella say is the select board said to the Conservation Commission, go do it.
No, they didn't say that. They said basically, continue what you're doing. And what we're doing this commission has never adopted the planning process. It has never appointed anybody to undertake it. And what we're trying to do is create a vehicle, not dissimilar to some of the
Like that.
Nipmuc Lake group of which you are associated, so that we can have a working group to bring back to the commission periodically the status of planning, and you can make your decisions about whether you want to continue or not.
Mr. Chair, if I could just answer Carl's, because my sense is you're right, but he's very concerned that it be done by the book. So he's gonna make a motion that the conservation wants to establish a subcommittee.
Well,
And he's of the opinion that that should have the blessings of the select. I don't see the need for that, but why not?
The
What
select
is-
board said you can work as like an ad hoc group. You don't need formal meetings or, work as a group, and we don't need to do anything right now. Like, we have too many committees. So I think a formal vote requesting the select board to actually take action is the next step, because
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some.
What is the goal behind the subcommittee?
The goal to the subcommittee is to bring you and work with the community and other individuals who have talents planned for Muddy Brook North as an initial conservation area, which would include whether there's trail, there is money for a trail, how's that trail going to be arranged? What are the other attributes of that property that people in Mendon can enjoy? Are there going to be interpretive signage on that property? What are the events that can occur on that property? It's a management plan for a conservation area.
And I think the whole.
Hold on, because I think I cut Leah. Which one of you guys did I cut off?
I did you cut me?
This last time.
Okay. I was just gonna say, which we desperately have a need for in this commission, because there's a vacuum there. You guys all know that when it comes to conservation lands, we scratch our neck.
So,
I said this to the land use committee not long ago. During Christmas, my whole family was here during Christmas, and our kids, who are no longer kids, said, let's go to Cormier Woods because my daughter works for the trust, okay, the trustees. So we went there, and they have new signs there. The new signs are parking this way, trail this way, and here's the map of the trail. There's simply no information of what is on that property. Whether there are foundations that have historic value, whether there's vegetation that people should understand what that vegetation means in the context of the ecology of that area. That's the type of planning that we can do as an initial pilot.
that was my question, is if you were to do Muddy Brook, would that be the only thing, or are you going to continually manage all of the different town-owned?
No, we're talking only about the conservation areas that are under the jurisdiction of this commission, number one. Muddy Brook is the pilot to begin.
Okay,
If that is successful and everybody likes it and the select board thinks it's a good idea, then we will move on to another one.
right, like Cormier Woods and.
Well, Cormier Woods is a trust property, but
The town forest is an ideal place to.
we can do a forest management plan.
Of a larger management.
So I think all we're trying to do is, I mean, mention this again. I've been a public administrator for 50 goddamn years. I do not think it is appropriate for three members of a group without any kind of action of approval of what they're doing to go out and meet with the public and represent the town of Mendon. And are we subject to the Open Public Meetings Act? Subcommittees of the state of Massachusetts conservation commissions are. Three members of a commission going out, say, hi, how are you? I'm here to help plan your conservation areas. That, what are the rules? We need to have some structure so the rules are clear, the public knows what we are doing, and the public is involved based on the normal statutory requirements of a conservation commission. You retain control.
Well, that's one of my questions, Terry, and I'm only asking questions. I'm not saying that I'm not in support of
Right.
it. I'm asking questions that will be asked. Is what you're doing only gonna fall on the Conservation Commission's lap to approve or disapprove?
The plan, under the Wetlands Conservation, under the Conservation Commission Act, you have the authority to do planning for the lands that are conservation areas.
And is that what the select board is referring to, is since we already have the power to do it, why do we need another committee to do it?
Well,
Because we don't have time.
Okay, and
I mean,
short
We don't
answer.
have time in this function of also doing wetland protection. So
we
in my
have
opinion,
three people who are volunteering to do the legwork for the commission and come back and report to the commission periodically on what we're doing.
So you have a question?
My question was the one you asked, are we doing anything we're not already authorized to do? And the answer is no, but we still have concerns. My response is that rather than asking to talk to the full select board, we have a select board liaison, Jason Cooter. He sometimes shows up, sometimes he doesn't. I believe that we should have him come to a meeting or contact him between now and the next meeting, and then express the concerns about that you just said. Does Jason, as our liaison, feel that we should go and ask the select board for explicit permission to form a subcommittee that includes members of the public? Or does he say, just go off and do that? And rather than going back and forth another time, taking up time on the full select board to sit down.
I don't think Jason can give approval for us to go and make a subcommittee. I talked with Jeremy yesterday and he said, put it, whatever motion we make on the letterhead to be more compelling. Because last time when I went and presented, it was just me. And the opinion I got was that they didn't really feel like they needed to formalize anything because there was no, demand that they do so.
Let's hear your motion. Sounds like you were prepared for a motion tonight.
Well, I think I don't just want to have a motion. I think we need to understand that we're not going to go to the select board without something very specific about what the activities, quote, authorities, although there aren't really any, and the relationship between the subcommittee and the commission are spelled out in a document that they will be able to see. Because I think just going and saying, hi, we'd like to have a subcommittee doesn't work. I think everyone needs to have an understanding of what the subcommittee is going to do, what the types of membership of the non-member participants would be. Yeah, the examples of those people. There has to be a public process.
Do you have anything written up, anything to look at?
I will send you something to look at tomorrow.
Okay, then, honestly, this conversation right here seems a little premature if we don't have anything to look at.
Well, I think the question is that you're not taking any action other than informing the select board that you're going to consider the establishment of a committee at your next meeting, pending their concurrence. So you're not taking an action to establish anything.
But we don't know what we're establishing, is my point, is without any information, all we're saying is,
Okay,
yeah, we want
so
to.
you're not establishing. Go ahead, go ahead.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would like something to look at, to say, okay, this is what their agenda is, this is how they're gonna execute it.
Okay, well, you know what the planning process is because we gave you that in a presentation. Data collection and go ahead, Carl.
Yeah,
Chair.
yes,
I
Carl.
would propose the following timeline for the Conservation Land Planning Subcommittee. That Terry come to our next meeting with the document. We would then review the document, and if we agree with the document, at that point, we would discuss whether we feel we need to refer the matter to the select board or whether we feel that we can act at that point in time.
Could we amend that thought to include prior to the meeting so that we have time to review it?
I mean, you've already reviewed the planning outline, which is the process the subcommittee is going to follow, and you were given a presentation about it. So I think we're looking at more of a structure of the subcommittee, who's gonna be on it, frequency of meetings, public responsibilities, that sort of thing. You're not looking at what the subcommittee is gonna do, because we've already reviewed and general consensus have approved it. That document's been shared with everyone already, like December, November, when we did that the first time.
I'm not understanding the point of, it's what the select board is looking for. Well,
Because you can't make your own subcommittee. You don't have the authority to make a subcommittee.
Why not?
You do.
Okay, I don't
I
know.
mean, there are subcommittees all over the place and conservation commissions. Upton has a subcommittee on land management for their conservation areas. They have a subcommittee on open space.
Should have just had a subcommittee on what to do about dealing with the rectory that I listened to in the presentation.
That they made themselves?
Yes.
You know, there's no question that you have the authority to create a subcommittee.
The question is.
The question is.
Advisory members, that's the.
Well, the question is the associate membership certainly, but the question really is that the select board is understanding what the subcommittee is going to
Yeah.
be doing. And that, I think, is very clear. We're going to do a plan for Muddy Brook that is a management plan and interpretive plan for that property. That's all that's going to happen.
Right.
And a pilot.
So wouldn't that make sense to put that in the document so that we can all give it our blessing and then send it to them and say, we are in favor of this?
I think it's premature to say that you want to create something that kind of puts them in a position of saying yes or no. I think if you tell them that you're considering doing that, then you're not putting them in that position.
Okay, so at this point, then I'm gonna entertain a motion on this preliminary discussion of creating a subcommittee that involves the public.
Okay, let me read you a motion and see if you think it does what you want it to do. There's my motion.
This is funny because we're always talking about doing things the right way. He's doing it the right way.
That's,
You guys are questioning it.
You know,
it's not questioning it, it's, I want to make sure that I understand it as everybody else will want to understand it.
okay,
Because
Document.
the rest of the public isn't gonna have that document.
Right, but it's up to us to interpret that document in order to make this decision.
And that's what I'm asking for a motion for. Is,
by the way, I should say, and Isabella met with Jeremy yesterday, and he suggested that we go back.
go back where?
To the
Back to the
select
select board, because they did not make a subcommittee last time when I asked them to.
And Okay.
Right.
I mean, like Terry and I have gone, we've gone to the select board, we've gone to the land use committee, so the public is well informed. It's in 3 public meetings of the same presentation of the charge of the subcommittee that we're gonna do. So it's definitely public, and the planning document is also public because it's on our site.
So I'm still asking for a motion.
Okay, I move. I move that the Conservation Commission express to the town of Mendon Select Board its intention to consider creating a conservation area land planning subcommittee at its next scheduled meeting pending the prior concurrence of the select board.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Did you,
Call for the nays, please.
Oh, is there any nays? You didn't, you might not wait. You should have just said yes.
and I will get you by email a resolution that spells out exactly what the membership will be and the authorities and the requirements for Open Public Meeting Act and all the rest.
And what did you say? You were gonna have 7 members?
I think what we were talking about is the 3 plus up to 4 associates. Associates can't vote.
Okay.
They just volunteers, so they have special skills.
Is there going to be any mention of if there's missed meetings, whether you can vote or not, or is it, you can take a month off and still vote?
I mean,
It's not a public hearing, or
Okay, so there's nothing about that. It's all research and
there will be public meetings along the way. And that is why you really do need some structure to say, hey, it's not just Terry and
Well, that's-
Lena and Peter.
and that's the only thing that I'm trying to navigate is
You will get it.
how it's gonna be structured.
You will get
And carry
it.
on.
They already have, these 2 people already have seen it, so I will
It's,
send it to everybody.
it's pretty darn good.
Carl?
The purpose of the subcommittee is to, outside of the regularly scheduled meeting, authorize and allow members of the committee to engage in research and perform useful work. The subcommittee on its own is not authorized to take any action. Instead, what they do is they report up to the full
That's
committee
correct.
for consideration, and the full committee is what would make any decisions.
Yes.
And what would the subcommittee, what would their, execution activities?
Okay, let me tell you what we've done. Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, no, no one has been chosen.
You said there was 3 people.
Well, no, the 3 of us were given the authority by you all to come back to you with a planning process. That's why there's,
I know you said a couple emails.
I mean, 4 people can't meet outside of a,
what we've already done, and we're getting help from people. Susan sent us some geology information about the area of Muddy Brook. Geology is an important factor in terms of planning. We have soil maps of the area. So we're beginning to collect data. And that data is going to turn into constraints and opportunities. There may be some data that says we don't want a lot of people in this half acre because it's a wetland and we don't want them stomping around in it. So we're putting together the data set for which a group can begin to say, okay, here are the good places. Here's where a trail should be. Is it a loop trail or is it a straight trail, which then you have to turn around and go back the same way you came, or it's a loop? It's putting together the process of saying, what is this property going to be used for in the future? And how is it going to be used? That's really what it is, but you will get it in your
No,
email.
that's fine. And that's, like I said to her, that's what I was trying to understand is what you're trying to do is map out the town-owned lands and come up with a best use management plan.
Only the areas that are under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission.
All right, can we move on?
Any further discussion?
I was finished.
And we voted on it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so item agenda number 8, updates, Chair. I don't have anything. I usually never do because I rely on you, Isabella.
Not too much. I've been working on some of the grant implementation and other things, so not too many updates.
The land use committee did not meet. See, we need to.
No, and neither did the Lake Task Force. The Park Association. So item agenda number 9, review and approve minutes. Were you able to get
No.
those up?
Very
Okay,
good ones.
so we don't have that to worry about. Good welfare for the commission. Does Carl, would you, see, I did that by looking over there. Carl, would you like to add something?
Yes, I have two issues to bring up. The first one is, as I read, agenda item 7, we talked about a forest management plan just for the town forest. I think we should at a future meeting, perhaps in consultation with the gentleman who came in from the state, talk about that kind of plan for all of the forested areas in town for which we are responsible.
I agree.
That could get put on a future agenda. The other one is, I will now put on my other hat. The General Bylaws Review Committee, as part of their rolling review, looked at the chapter in our general bylaws regarding lakes and streams, which Jeremy looked at as well with us, and basically we copied and pasted the state law. So his feeling is that if we're going to go and put some teeth into it, put some fines into it, put some other work into it, that is actually something that the conservation should be involved in. So I would ask that at a future meeting, we have an agenda item to look at whether we want to modify the bylaw to be more helpful.
My feedback to the GRBC, typically the lakes and ponds bylaws, if you look at other towns, Stowe is an example I can think of. They're related to boating, and I don't think this commission has anything to do with boating. Because we don't regulate the water, and we're not gonna regulate speed or anything like that, so.
So Carl's been pushing for a boat since I've been on here.
But I don't think, it's not in your charge with the Wetland Protection Act or anything like that. That's not what that bylaw relates to.
So is there something specific that you would be looking at for lakes and streams?
Fines for
For what?
failure to abide by the restrictions that are in the current bylaw. That if you do not give right of way, if you are photobombing at high speed, the place where people are trying to take the photographs on the conference center, things like that.
I don't know.
I
We
don't
wouldn't
see
have
where that's our
authority.
jurisdiction. I think that's more enforcement.
Okay, well, I'll take that back to the GBRC then.
And so it goes under the environmental police.
Or regular police.
If only they had it, only if they borrowed the boat from the fire department.
Didn't we requisition a boat?
I got a John boat in my house. I need a boat.
All right,
50-year-old.
anyway, we're digressing. Any other good and welfare? Item agenda number 11, items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Isabella, you got anything?
No, but so, sorry, before we end, can we go back?
Are you gonna be ready?
Yeah, can we go back to number 5 with the commercial forestry?
That's what I was wondering,
I mean, I can write an enforcement order that's as simple as no commercial, no forest activities can continue until a site visit is had, but you can't grant authority to resume work on site.
but they
either.
know that there's no work to be done now, that's right.
Yeah,
They-
We'll have to wait till our next meeting, you're saying, or?
I mean, that's
Call.
unless you authorize the chair to make a call on site, but like that's open meeting issues there. So, yeah, I don't think, I think to be, while we're in a public meeting, it needs to be clear, you're not really in a position to grant authority during a site visit. Additionally, I don't work Fridays and then Monday is a holiday, so should I be expected to monitor my phone for a call from Gary tomorrow and schedule as soon as possible, or are we waiting till Tuesday?
But are we gonna have a formal enforcement order?
You voted for a formal enforcement.
We're going to get back onto that, it's time for you to start that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that should go out immediately, so I will be doing that.
Okay.
Right, and I don't think that with, the mail and whatnot, that,
They won't get it by certified mail, they get a PDF, and then the certified mail will be postmarked tomorrow as the effective date. I think, that's what I typically do with enforcement orders. I do come in on Fridays.
It's just gonna be simply no work.
Yeah, I mean, really, it should have included install erosion controls if deemed necessary immediately, especially in snow melt conditions. Whether we're gonna investigate restoration, hiring a wetland scientist, but, now they're not here, so I wouldn't make any amendments at this point, that's TBD.
Just
I think stop the work has already been guaranteed, or at least, requested.
So, sorry, so my question was, are people expecting to go tomorrow, or are we waiting till Tuesday? And then, do you want an enforcement order issued to both the property owner and to Jim McCarthy? To, ultimately the landowner is liable, but whether we want to include the person who did the work.
Both, yeah. Cause he did the work, the landowner.
Right, but it runs with the property, it's not focused on a person saying there shall no work be done on this site.
Right,
Because
So whether you want copies going to both people.
It makes sense to have them go to both people because there's actually 3 people involved. There's the harvester, the facilitator, and then the property owner.
I think the real question is whether we can, at this meeting, empower the chair, that if everything looks okay, he release it after the site visit, or does it have to wait until we have our next formal meeting, which will be 2 weeks from tonight?
I don't know, I think we should all decide on this one.
Right, but how do you decide? We'll decide at the site.
Yeah. Well, you can't decide.
Here's a question that I'll propose. Does it make sense to, if they allow us a site visit, to allow them to take the wood that is at the front of the property near the street and no more?
You can't make those decisions on site. So the fastest thing you could do if there was a site visit on Tuesday, you post an additional meeting for Thursday night, if that's what you want to push for. So then it's only a week delayed. But then we'd be having an off-cycle meeting.
That works for me. I think you schedule a quick Zoom meeting for Thursday, and if we think there's no problem, at least let them get rid of the logs up front, and then have to bang around the rest of the issue.
Anybody else have an opinion on that?
Nothing should get done until we have a site visit.
Right, but no, the question is should we, if by Tuesday they get us information back, should we schedule a Thursday meeting to grant permission to do what we feel is within acceptable
I
means,
think we need
best
to-
management practices?
He didn't have a forestry plan. He didn't rush to get those. He just, they're kind of forest. He can wait. We have another meeting.
Anybody else? There's 7 of us here and look for 7 opinions.
Well,
8 of us. 7.
I think if we don't find anything of concern, which I'm not sure is gonna be the case, but then there ought to be a mechanism to release them. And I don't know how you all work, but as a former executive director, my commission would empower me to do anything.
So you, I mean, I guess you could empower the chair to make his own decision, potentially with the agent, I guess, but to revise the enforcement order. And then Bob can issue a revised enforcement order after the site visit himself. I don't know if I want my name on it.
I want to see the site.
And that was my statement is if by Tuesday they have a site visit scheduled for us and we accept the conditions that are there, should we have a Thursday meeting to say,
I mean, I guess, but you can
So-
also issue a new enforcement order yourself if you want to. As a chair,
but wouldn't we have to release the first one? I thought you couldn't have two at once.
I don't know. I think it's a gray area.
So
Thursday,
again, this is all, it's all based on if they can get us information by Tuesday, which gives us 48. Ooh, it doesn't because Monday's a holiday.
Tuesday, you post it on Tuesday
yeah.
for Thursday night. I'm
Right.
not coming to a site visit on a holiday.
No, that's fine. What I'm saying is if we can get the information and accept the conditions that are there, they can ask for a meeting on Tuesday. We can have an emergency meeting on Thursday and release the enforcement order. So it all
In theory.
falls on their laps at that point. If they can get us on site so that we can get a site visit, then we can approve it next Thursday.
Right. If
But it has to be done by
Tuesday, they're gonna have to wait for our next.
For 2
formal
weeks.
meeting, 2 weeks. So it
Because
gives them incentive to schedule. a
Correct.
visit on Tuesday.
if they're that interested in not losing money because they're worried about their profits dwindling, then they will do everything they can to get us on that site so that we can release the enforcement.
But
So-
what if we go on site and it's
And if you don't like it, then we're not gonna
Then the
release
enforcement
the.
order stands.
You can revise the enforcement order to clarify the next steps.
Right, and at that point, if you want siltation or erosion control or anything else, then you can add it in. So the cleanest way to do this is to send them a letter that says, if by Tuesday, we can get on that site and look and have no reservations, then we will have a Thursday meeting and then release the enforcement order for you to take the logs that are near the street.
we'll have a Thursday meeting to consider
Right.
releasing the.
If needed, or we're gonna just have a meeting next week, no matter what.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we schedule an off-cycle meeting of the Conservation Commission 1 week from tonight. The agenda would only be to review and revise the existing enforcement order for 51 and 53 Washington Street. The meeting will be called if we are able to have a site walk by Tuesday so that we are able to meet the 48-hour posting notice.
I'll second that.
okay, that just made me think of another question though. What about the other properties?
Well, right now, let's deal with this one. This is the one that, the other ones aren't active right now. They've already been done and are done.
The committee still has the discretion to issue enforcement orders on those other two properties if we deem it necessary.
You have 2 years from the date of discovery.
And Isabella and I discovered the one on North Avenue a couple months ago and talked about it in email. So we have a paper trail of that.
I'll second the motion by Carl, then I
Yeah,
guess
we already did.
sorry, I would suggest, does that also mean even if it doesn't happen on Tuesday, even if it site visit happened on Wednesday, we can still have the meeting on Thursday? No.
Can't post a meeting there.
Has to be.
We're saying we're gonna post it, we're gonna have a meeting on Thursday.
That's what I interpret Carl's.
Upon whether or not we get the information on Tuesday.
What do you mean when you say get information?
Well, in my opinion, if they do not schedule a site visit by next Thursday, then you should be escalating the enforcement order, because right now it just says stop work.
So there's
So
a
I can
motion.
post the meeting. Carl made a motion to have an off-cycle meeting, so I feel like I'm posting it Tuesday for Thursday night, and then in theory, we're having a site visit.
So you have that site visit or?
If I heard Carl right, he's asking for an off-cycle meeting contingent upon getting information on Tuesday to further need that Thursday meeting.
I guess my question, why does it have to be on Tuesday? I understand the need to have 48 hours, but we're giving you 48 hours.
Okay, so I'll say that Peter's making your friendly amendment, as long as we have a site visit scheduled for sometime before Thursday evening, if the site visit is scheduled by Tuesday. So that makes sense.
Okay, so would you repeat the motion at this point?
Okay. So the motion would be that we have an off-cycle meeting next week to, the agenda item would be to review the enforcement order on 5153 Washington Street. And with the hope that we are able to schedule a site visit by that, before that Thursday. And if we are not able to have a site visit, then we cancel the meeting because that's the only thing on the agenda.
Is there a second? Okay, so motion's been made and seconded to have an off-cycle meeting that revolves around, we get information by Thursday that a site visit is acceptable. Not even asking for discussion. We've discussed it enough. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is, any nays? Then motion passes. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Alice. All right, so let's see, we are, I believe, on item agenda number 12. Motion to adjourn, stop recording.
Motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna print the EO page.
You need to sign that, Isabella?
Yeah.
Easy pen that, go.